I want to tell you a story today about what the future is going to look like and who the people are who are going to shape it. But to tell that story, I want to start in an unlikely place to understand the future, the past. At the beginning of the 20th century, the Industrial Revolution was going through an accelerated phase. The previous era had already brought the basic fruits of industrialization: the steam engine, the cotton gin, and the interchangeable parts. These innovations had helped bring about a hierarchical society that resembled the factory system. Then, as this new phase approached, we saw quantum breakthroughs: the harnessing of electricity, the airplane, and the automobile. These innovations helped bring about democratizing political and cultural change, including the beginnings of public education and the New Deal. To many, the world seemed to be in a state of chaos. The idea that horses and railroads would no longer be the dominant mode of communication, of transportation, seemed radical. So did the idea to many of women having the right to vote. To many, the accepted truths of the Victorian age seemed to be coming crashing down amidst the rise of technology, urbanization, and immigration. Some businessmen didn't understand how big the change would be. They failed to adapt either because they didn't know how or because they were scared. In this time period, young upstart competitors comfortable with the changing times rose to the top. People like Thomas Edison, who saw the future that was fast approaching and adapted pragmatically to be part of it. People like Edison marched on with their innovation, unconcerned about what it might mean for horse and buggy whip makers. Once in a generation, we have a revolution that shifts the fundamentals of our economy, society, and culture. It also changes the way we communicate and how we relate to each other. We're in the midst of one of those shifts today. Our modern world is a world of 24/7 communication, big data, and millions of apps. But it's also a world that's changing its social software as well. The rules that govern life in a civilized society are undergoing as much change today as was produced by the Continental Congress 200 years ago. Except today they're taking place in a much less transparent, much less visible, and much less formal process. Our world has always been changing, and the pace and rate of that change has been increasing steadily for centuries. But today, the exponential power of modern technology is making that change more disruptive and more deeply felt than ever before. Consider this. In 1997, the Palm Pilot was introduced to great fanfare. It took 18 months for it to sell 1 million units. Now, in 2010, when the iPad was introduced, it took just 24 hours to sell the same amount. Everything is changing fast. In the past few years, our political system has experienced some of the most volatile change in our nation's history. We went from this, to this, to this, and from this, to this. This is just in a few years. This is the world we are living in. This is the fast future. Change is fast, and change is constant. In 1968, the film 2001: A Space Odyssey imagined what the world might be like in the then far-off year of 2001. They figured that 40 years was a reasonable amount of time for us to shift into a world where we all lived in outer space and were controlled by computers. Of course, they were wrong about that, but when you think about it, today, we can't look 40 years into the future. In fact, we can't realistically look just more than a few years ahead without seeming ridiculous in our predictions as to what might happen. Things simply change too much, too fast. So our biggest institutions, our businesses, and our government haven't always had an appropriate amount of time to catch up. Our world runs on an operating system. And much like a computer operating system, it requires regular updates. Sometimes those updates are small, and we switch versions without anyone noticing, just a little update. Then sometimes there's a bigger upgrade, and we're prompted to take some action and do a small upgrade ourselves. But then sometimes we wake up, and it seems like it's changed so much that we skipped a version. Well, our world has a new operating system, the kind that seems like it skipped a version. That's because this operating system has been coded by a new generation, the Millennials. The Millennials are people who are today between the ages of 18 and 30. There are over 80 million of us in the US alone. We're the biggest generation in history, even bigger than the boomers. And there are almost 1 billion of us worldwide. We're the most global generation. We can be in touch with any of our peers anywhere in the world with just one click. And we're the most connected generation. 92% of us are regularly online. We're helping write this code by creating new kinds of companies like Facebook and Twitter to help connect and empower our voices, and companies like Tom's Shoes that aim to do good and do well at the same time. The coders of this generation are these extraordinary leaders who created these companies and these ideas, but they're also people we see every day on the street. Everyday millennials who, through their user power and their purchasing power, are helping to shape this code, making businesses more responsible and holding politicians accountable. You know, our generation came of age in a very hectic period. You know, we saw the 9/11 attacks, and we learned that we're not alone, that we're part of a deeply interconnected and often troubled world. We saw the impeachment of a president and the rise of a politics of extreme personal destruction, making us skeptical about the ability of our modern political system to address big challenges. We grew up in the Columbine years, and we saw our peers kill our peers and learned that danger could be just around the door. All these events took place at key moments in our own personal growth and development. They made us keenly aware of the challenges our world faces and eager to try and do something about them. In 2008, the financial crisis showed millennials about the regular uncertainty in our world and how to fight it. You know, as the economic crisis got worse, the millennials actually became more optimistic about their own economic future, while other age groups became more pessimistic. The millennial response was a rise in entrepreneurship, millennials creating their own opportunities, their own companies, and their own jobs. This kind of adaptability is born out of necessity and will serve us well in the fast future world. Because we're the ones who are writing the code, we can most effectively tweak it. You know, other developers may participate. We're open source. But you know, at the end of the day, we have what no other generation has. We have one foot in the old world and one foot in the new. We were born in a world without computers. In our early years, we didn't have iPhones in our hands. We know what it's like to have a friend in real life before we have them on Facebook. And we also did our first research projects in physical libraries. We understand how the old world worked, and at the same time, this new world comes intuitively to us. The ability to use tools and navigate the fast future is second nature. For us, that's the new normal. You know, we've been criticized as an entitled generation, as narcissistic. People have said that our economic progress is going to be stunted so much, so early, that we'll never recover. But in fact, our generation has developed a powerful theory of social change, pragmatic idealism. The idea that, while we very much want to see big change in the world, we understand that in order to do that, we have to have a plan. And that plan often means working with our biggest institutions at the same time that we create our own. Pragmatic idealism is exemplified by people like Mark Rembert and Taylor Stuckert of Wilmington, Ohio. There's Mark and Taylor. Mark and Taylor grew up in Wilmington, a small town in Ohio, and they went away to college. They came back home in 2008 for what they thought was just a quick trip before heading off to join the Peace Corps. But when they were home, they saw the devastation the economic crisis had brought to their hometown. A DHL plant closed in Wilmington, and overnight they lost 8,500 jobs. Unemployment was at 18%, some of the highest anywhere in the nation. Now, Mark and Taylor knew they couldn't fix the global economy, but they knew they could do something about their hometown. So they got to work. They started an organization called Energize Clinton County with the goal of empowering the residents of their town into becoming agents of economic change. They started an innovative fellows program to bring people back here, back to Main Street, back to Wilmington, to help businesses learn the new skills of the new economy. They certified the region as Ohio's first ever green enterprise zone, making it possible for new businesses to relocate there. And last year, Mark became the executive director of the Wilmington-Clinton County Chamber of Commerce. They're just two of the many millennials who are using this idea of pragmatic idealism to make an impact in the world in the ways they best know how and the ways they best can. We're far from the first generation who wants to change the world. Under the specter of the Vietnam War and intense racism, our parents' generation wanted to achieve equality and peace for all. You know, they viewed the system frequently as an enemy, as an impossible partner. They often even advocated for overthrow of that system. But when those goals were accomplished, those incredible goals, when the Civil Rights Act was passed and the war in Vietnam ended, much of the movement for broad-based social change dissipated. Our generation views the world as constantly changing and constantly changeable. Because of the world we've grown up in, we look at an issue like climate change, something we're very passionate about, and see it as what it is, a long-term set of problems. It's a complex set of interlocking issues that if we care about, we're going to be working on for the rest of our lives through all sorts of different areas, whether it's not-for-profit work, activism, or through business. We understand that this is an issue that we have to work on in the long haul, that it's not going to happen overnight. Our generation views the world as a more open, sharing, and connecting place, and we believe that technology is one of the greatest forces pushing that into being. When youth and technology merge with this idea of pragmatic idealism, we've seen what happens. Every generation is a product of its times, but because of the times that we've come of age in and the way we've responded to it, we're far from ordinary. The things we've already been able to do are impressive. We talked about some of them here today. We've toppled dictators, elected a president, and created a social network that's connecting 1 billion people around the world. And now, as our generation takes our rightful place in a global society on the cusp of a once-in-a-generation revolution, we truly have the potential to be the greatest agents of change in this century. Thank you.